Okay, so let's talk about vampires.
Okay.
Why don't we talk about it? Yeah.
As I said at the beginning, I want to bite you neck.
Why don't we talk about the vampires?
Vampires have an interesting origin. It didn't happen with Bram Stoker's Dracula or anything like that, although there was a Count Dracula and all this sort of stuff. And he was, involved in this. Vampirism actually got started by some people who were trying to improve the human race 6,000 years ago. And, you ever hear of Samaria? Okay, Samaria, you know where it's at?
Turkey?
Huh?
Around Turkey? No.
Actually, what's now Iran and Kuwait makes up most of what was ancient Samaria. And it's bordered on the south by the Persian Gulf. And this is supposedly the cradle of civilization and mankind and stuff. Some of us don't consider being civilized to be particularly a good thing, because what happened there that was different 5,000 years ago, 1,000 years after what we're going to talk about, 5,000 years ago, in Samaria, they set up an agricultural-based society. And they stopped the nomadic movement of the peoples and all this sort of stuff, set up borders and cities and all this sort of thing. And when they found nomads, they either killed them or enslaved them or ran them out of the area. And, because nomads are used to going wherever they will, and so you went and dug up their favorite berry bush and planted a bunch of other stuff, and they're upset, and they go trampling through your crops trying to find their berry bush. So it's like, okay, it's a problem. Two ways of life, and they don't get along real well. Well, 1,000 years before, people were still doing this nomadic thing, and people would go out like the animals did and graze and hunt. They would go out and they would find their vegetables, their berries, or whatever and stuff. But they would also go out and run down some animal, kill it, and eat it right there on the spot. Sometimes they'd cook it, sometimes they wouldn't. In the desert, which, it wasn't as much of a desert then as it is now, that area, it was still fairly dry and arid, and they didn't waste any moisture. So they were after the blood and the meat and everything. And there were spiritual centers set up in different areas that became the cities and things, like Ur and Lanos and others of the cities in that area. And they had their temple areas and their spiritual practices and stuff, which was pretty much like a lot of the rest of the world at the time, based on the Sarganac stuff, but not it had evolved beyond that. And there were two people.
What stuff?
Huh?
What stuff did you say?
What?
You said centered around certain type of stuff. And I missed that.
Yes, like the Sarganac tradition and stuff.
Sort of, okay.
This thing kept vibrating in my pocket. It's the battery dying. Okay. The thing with these people is there were some of the priests and priestesses have been looking for a better way to live, a way to make it easier for humans to live, because let's face it, when you have to go out and graze around in different places and you have to go chase down animals and kill them and eat them and stuff, you're working hard. And
not everybody was able to do it.
And not everybody was able to do it. When they couldn't, then they would sicken and die, and people were upset if they lost their loved ones and stuff. So, and a lot of times they were dealing with animals that made the animals we have today look pretty tame. They had dire bears and dire wolves and saber-toothed cats back then and all this sort of stuff. You know, when you went out and you cornered one of these things to try and make a meal out of it, chances are it was going to eat you. You know, so, there was a priest by the name of Dagon, and he was married, and they had a daughter, and her name was Seraphina. And Seraphina was, you know, Dagon was probably the most powerful priest they had at the time, and Seraphina made him look pretty tame. And so they had been working on a way with the spirits and others to come up with a way to make a shift, basically what we would know as a genetic shift in the human race, and that would cause something better to come out. There would be an easier way to get food. And basically food is energy, and our body takes it and processes it and uses it in different ways. Well, they were after a more pure form of energy. And you know, they were, you know, the first flood was long over at that point, and they knew about the process that Shataniku had gone through, which we've discussed before, where, you know, blood sacrifices got started and human sacrifice and all that stuff, and all the power that came from drinking the blood and the orgies that would take place and all this sort of thing. They knew about all that. So between that and talking with the spirits and stuff, they were looking for a way to get that energy, but in a more useful way for humans. And so they decided that, even though it was kind of against the way their culture was set up, they needed to make a little change. And so they got rid of Mama. They basically retired her, if you will. You know, she could go and live someplace else and whatnot. And Dagon and Seraphina, father and daughter, got married. Kind of freaked out society a little bit. And then they had children that were conceived in a very specific and powerful ritual setting. And all through Seraphina's pregnancy, when they had this you know, other ritual work going on and things to have various spirits come and work with them within her womb and all this thing. And when those children were born, there was a boy and a girl, and they were a little different. When they grew teeth, they weren't exactly normal teeth. And their appetite was a little different. They didn't want mother's milk, they wanted mother's blood. You know, and she would feed them some every day, and she would eat a lot of meat and stuff herself to build up more and feed them a little more every day. And then it got to where it was really beginning to be, no pun intended, quite a drain. And so they began bringing in slaves and stuff like that and bleeding them and feeding the children. And then the children got old enough where they had a little strength and stuff to them. And so they would you know, find a way for them to feed either with some animal or with some, you know, some person, that they would bite them and drink their blood. So this is where the idea of getting bitten around the neck and all this sort of stuff was, because that was simply the easiest way to fight somebody and get a whole lot in a hurry without causing them to bleed to death. You know, they found out real quick, if you bite the femoral arteries in the legs, they're dead a minute later, and you wasted a whole lot of blood because you can't drink that fast. And so, in the process of going through all of this, the people of Samaria didn't care about what their purpose for doing this was anymore. They were afraid of these people. And you know, the idea that there were going to be more of them running around you know, and what happens eventually when they get to the point that there are more of them than there are of the average human. And they're like, you don't need to worry about this. We're doing this for everyone's greater good and stuff, you know. And they were working also on ways to get to where they could take the average human and get them to go through a training process and spiritual empowerment process where they would become like these children and be able to, once they got to where they were a little bit older, then they would be able to do like, the children got to where they could do, where they didn't need blood anymore. They could just take the energy. And that's what they were after. They were getting to where they could just take some energy, not have to bother with the blood or anything like that, just take the energy and go on. And, there are plenty of people in society, in any society, where they just have too much energy. They're like the Energizer Bunny on steroids, and they're buzzing around all over the place, And maybe they have so much energy that they don't sleep well and all this sort of thing. They would give anything to be like anybody else. And so they were taking people like that to be donors. And they would simply take some energy and get these people would calm down, and they would be happy and stuff and whatnot. And that was fine, but then the unthinkable happened. There was an emergency. There was a major, weather event that caused pretty much catastrophe for the folks in the area. And some of these people who had come up from, Dagon and Seraphina's, continued mating and stuff, and then also their children's children and whatnot, shall we say their source of supply got damaged. And so they went out and they took it from some other people. And those people really, then the fear really set in. And, they attacked them and did everything they could to destroy them. And they pretty much had to go underground. And it didn't matter that there were all these good intentions around all of this, and it didn't matter that they were able to do some really good things, that they became some of the best healers around. See, someone who can take energy, like, want to try a little process?
I don't know.
It's not gonna bite your neck or anything.
Don't take my energy, I don't
No.
have that much.
We will give you some energy. How
All
about
right.
that?
Can I ask a question before you do?
Sure.
How many generations before the catastrophic event?
Oh, they
You're
were,
talking 6,000 years ago to when?
it was like 40 years later.
Only 40 years, okay.
So they had basically, they had a number of children, and those children had been having children.
Okay,
And so
Just-
grandma and grandpa are still running around in the temple doing their
good enough.
stuff like any other priest or priestess, and a bunch of them were too, and then a bunch of them become healers and things. And so here's the thing. It's like, okay, you put your hands together, you find out, the thumb that's on top is your dominant hand, the other is your receptive hand. The dominant hand is the one that you send energy with the best. The other hand is the one that you would send energy with, you would receive energy with. And so, I'll just explain the process to you, and then you'll feel a little better. So what you can do is if you're working on someone and they have a problem, you can find the area on their body where the problem is, and you put your receptive hand there, and you hold their receptive hand with your dominant hand. And then you bring energy from the ill or injured area out, and you take it into your heart. You breathe in, deep breath, and hold. You like say 8 counts, and you hold it for 4, and you breathe out for 8, and hold it for 4. You breathe in through your nose, and you breathe out through your mouth. Basically, it's called shamanic breathing. And so, bring the energy in on your breath, and you hold the 4th count, and you take and you let your breath out, and then as you're breathing your next breath, you take some of your energy and you add it to that energy, and you use that to burn out any negative energy that's there, and to strengthen and purify the energy that you brought in. And then on your next breath out, you send it back into them. And so, over a period of 2 breaths, basically you're bringing energy in, you're purifying it, you're sending it back, so it gets this loop of energy going. Because most people, when they're ill, are ill because they don't have enough energy to make happen whatever it is that they need. If they they could heal themselves. So you do this process, and and it causes this great healing to take place. Sometimes we'll take people and we'll get them to pair up. Like, okay, there's 4 of us here. 2 people could do it together, 2 other people do it together, and then you just, with their receptive hand, hold the other person's dominant hand, and vice versa and stuff, and just kind of send some energy around. And it's real fun because about 70% of the people that you do this with can do this process with no problem. And the others, it's like, they don't feel any energy coming in, and the other people aren't feeling any energy going out and stuff. The process doesn't work for them. The people who can do this, because people continue to be attracted to each other and have sex with each other, they all look normal. The people who can do this have a vampire gene. Are we having fun yet? So,
So are there still vampires?
Oh, yeah.
around?
Absolutely. In fact, we'll get to that here in just a minute. The bad thing about this is they were driven into hiding, and all sorts of stories were made up about it. They're considered to be really bad. And so, what do they do about it? Well, some decided they were going to be bad, and others just decided that they were going to try and forget about it. So you have a whole lot of people who have a vampire gene, or therefore can be a vampire, but they don't even know it. There were a whole bunch of folks about 150 years ago in this country who were Native American, but did they want to claim it in the midst of white society? Oh no. So what did they come up with? What came up with originated with the Iroquois in this area. They called themselves Black Dutch. A little bit darker. Black Dutch, so. And were they Dutch? Not at all. Did they speak, that form of German? Not even slightly, But, they went around and spoke English like everybody else, and people would say, well, what race are you? Black Dutch. Okay. And they're like, oh yeah, well, we never heard of that, but cool, so, on you go. And
As long as you're not a native.
as long as you're not native, right. So the same thing went with the vampire crowd. There are lots of them out there who are, but they don't have a clue about it. Now, there are times, and there are people who run around and get involved with vampires on a regular basis, whether they know it or not. Have you ever been in a conversation with someone where the longer you're in it, the more vibrant and energetic they get, and the more drained you get? Well, you've been in the presence of someone who is a psychic vampire, as it's called nowadays.
So,
for thousands of years, they just called it being a vampire because they were taking the energy.
so vampires, at least today, I mean, they're not the kind that, they don't have the pointed teeth, they don't suck
No.
blood out of your neck, they just take your energy or give you energy or.
Yeah, they
whatever,
haven't
they
had
don't
the
even
teeth
know.
bit for about almost 5,000 years now, because they didn't need it. They needed it first when they were little babies, but they got to where they could, process mama's milk. They wouldn't be quite as strong and stuff and whatnot, but they would also be able to ambient feed on energy. Someone comes and oohs and ahs over the baby. They're just dumping all of this wonderful energy right there. The little baby just would suck it up and go on. They were giving it to them anyway. It's no big deal. But there are some people who never quite developed other ways of getting energy except for taking it from other people. And there are all kinds of ways to do it. I mean, honestly, the easiest way to do it is through sex. So this is one of those situations where having safe sex is a whole different connotation, It's not about some physical disease, it's about someone being able to take your energy or not. And, so that's the easiest way to put what's known as a deep barb, where someone can feed off of you anytime they want to, even to the point of draining your life force and you die. And they don't want to do that because you're their cow and they want to milk you. But these are people who are doing it consciously. They know what they're doing if they're setting up something like that. The average person who just gets in a conversation with someone and starts sucking their energy out is doing what's known as an ambient feed. It's energy that's in their aura around them and they're taking it. And so some more comes out to kind of defend the aura and they take that and stuff. I had an apprentice a few years ago named Dwayne. And Dwayne he was one of those people like the Energizer Bunny on steroids, And that also went with his questions. He could ask more questions faster than any apprentice I've ever had. It was intense. But we went to not a psychic fair, but a health fair one time. And he'd gotten this booth there and he wanted me to go with him and stuff. And we would, talk with some people about some stuff. And there was a woman there who was a conscious psychic vampire. And she was running around draining people all over the place. And Dwayne said, "What's going on with her?" And I told him. And said, "This is what she's doing stuff." And he says, "Oh no, she's coming over here." And she did. And she came over and she said, she started talking to Dwayne and she was draining him pretty good and stuff. And so I kept sending thoughts to Dwayne. If you want to implant a thought in someone's head, look at them basically right back at the brain stem and send your message there. And eventually they'll get it. Well, he was so busy trying to defend himself from this woman who was draining him that he wasn't paying a whole lot of attention. And all of a sudden he looked over at me and says, "I need to go to the bathroom?" And I said, "Yeah, I think you need to go to the bathroom." And so off he goes to go to the bathroom, and he gets out of her energy, and she immediately turns her attention to me and wished that she had. So you can go through a little shielding process that will defend you like nothing you ever saw and will wreck their day. Now, I have this little document that I wrote up called How to Wreck a Vampire. And I send it to people all the time who have this problem. So what you do basically is you see yourself dressed in red armor, like plate armor, not chainmail, plate armor, where they had it look like this guy was a tank on a horse, and the reason for red is, like for instance, in shamanic traditions and stuff, if we have stones that we do healing with, we may have turquoise and hematite and topaz and aquamarine and all this stuff, and we keep each one, we might have several of one, and we'll do it all together, but we keep them wrapped up in red cloth because the color red protects the energy. If you take a whole bunch of stones that are intended for healing and you clump them together, all their energy gets mixed up and they get weak you know, and it's bad because when they are in their soul group in the earth with all the other stones, they're the stones of their kind. You know, they're not mixed up with everything else in the earth. Go to a gravel pit, they are, sure, it all got chewed up and ground together. But, you know, so you want them to stay strong. So the red armor is to protect your energy. And then you see out around yourself a big chrome ball, you know, like you're inside of this hollow ball. And it's like a mirror on the inside and the outside. And on the inside, you put a layer of black felt. You see the thing with black versus other colors and stuff? When people start out in a lot of the mystery schools and stuff, they'll wear a white robe because white is a mixture of all colors, but it repels energy. Whereas in black, which is for masters, is, you know, the masters wear a black robe because that black robe, the black is a mixture of all colors and it absorbs energy. And so you have that black felt-like material out there around the inside of your sphere, your shield, as we like to call it, because anything that gets through the shield can get absorbed in that, but anything that doesn't, it gets out of the rest of it. You fill your shield, your chrome ball that you're in, and the space in between it and you with a violet flame. And it's also in between you and your armor. And over your armor, you want to put like a black cloak. You ever seen a monk's cloak where it has the hood that comes out and everything? You know, the Benedictines still wear that stuff, you know, where they have the robe and they'll pull the hood up and they use that to meditate. It's not just to stay warm. You know, they'll pull that up, close out the world, and they can meditate like nothing you ever saw. But you have it so that it keeps your enemies from being able to see you in the spirit world. Now, you may say, well, I have no enemies. Well, would you consider a vampire your enemy? I would. So I don't want them to be able to see me. But even if they can see me, then I've got this chrome ball out there, and I've got that violet flame that's in between me and my armor, between my armor and my cloak, between my cloak and shield. And that violet flame is there so that any negative energy or low-level positive energy that comes in hits it, and it will transmute it into a high-frequency positive energy for my use. Now, my second wife, Billy, was bar none the most beautiful woman I've ever laid eyes on, anywhere, anytime. And everywhere she went, guys were hitting on her. And she would go to this one tax attorney office where there were 8 attorneys and a whole bunch of paralegals and all that sort of stuff. And these guys were always after her. And they were dumping all this into her way. And she would just be worn out at the end of the day. She was just trying to get this audit done, you know. And so she came in one day and she was crying. So she, says, I just feel so drained when I come. I said, how do I deal with this? And so we went through this process. And the next time she went, all this energy they were dumping her way, it was good positive sexual energy, but it was low frequency energy, and it got turned into a higher frequency energy. And she came home and she wanted to go dancing. Well, nobody had been feeding me that energy that day. I've been doing inspections and stuff, and the last thing they wanted to see was somebody like me, And so I kind of created a little bit of a monster there. Beautiful monster, but a monster.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I don't think this is in relation to vampires, but I know that there are people, at least I've seen a couple movies about them, that they're called sin takers or something, that they will absorb all of your sin. And
we will get to that sort of thing. We will get to that sort of thing, because that actually does fall within the same line of the healing end of it.
Oh, okay.
What you do is, but you've got this ball, this shield. You see spikes coming out all around it. So it's like, what a mace is? An old knight's weapon. It's a post that had this ball with a bunch of spikes on it. Well, it's got a bunch of spikes coming out and had some little dish down at the bottom. And the spike is there to catch any negative energy that comes along, get it, spin it around in that dish to where it's going about 7 times faster than it came to you, and then just send it right back to where it came from. So you're building these layers of defense. And then all around and through the spikes, you have what's known as a hedge of thorns. And the hedge of thorns comes from the book of Ezra in the Jewish Bible. See, Ezra was my kind of prophet. He didn't wear clothes. I could. If you ever run around and say,
Like I
I
said,
have
I
so
don't
much
have
fun.
anything against
That's
all
what
naked
it is.
people. It's just that
So-
the picture you naked is what upsets me.
So Ezra didn't wear clothes, but his wife Gomer was a prostitute. And so she would wear clothes until she got work and take them off, you know. And there were these guys that were always enslaving her because they decided she was really beautiful, she was really fun, she was really good, and they just decided they wanted to keep her, and so they would. They'd make her be their little sex slave. And Ezra would have to go and get her back. And so one day he's gritching at God about it, and he's like, you know, Hashem, why do I have to keep going through this? You know, there has to be some way to keep this from happening. And so Hashem says, no problem. Put a hedge of thorns around her. The hedge of thorns will allow her to do whatever she needs to with anyone that she's supposed to, but if they have some ill intent towards her, it will keep them away. And so it will only allow her to be in relationships that she's supposed to be in. So you have this hedge of thorns, and it does the same thing for you. You have people that you deal with, maybe you like them, maybe you don't, and stuff, but all of a sudden they wind up out of your life. Chances are you and they weren't real good for each other. You know, the hedge of thorns took care of that. So, you have your hedge of thorns, you have your spikes, you have your ball, you have the violet flame, you have your cloak, you have your armor. What I like to do, besides all that, and I just kind of check that every once in a while for, you know, to make certain it's all really there, and I know it is, and after a while you get to where you don't even hardly have to think about it, you know it's there. Well, I put all these nice, juicy little bits of energy out around mine that vampires are going to want to get. But I set it up so that they get a part of the shielding process that I just described to you. The part that they get is the chrome ball. You see, and when they go after that energy, then this chrome ball manifests around them in the spirit world. It will allow positive energy out, but it will not allow negative energy out, as in trying to steal somebody's energy, trying to barb someone, trying to ambient feed or whatever and stuff. It won't allow that to happen. So they have to find new ways to do it. But then I siphon them to and from other vampires that I've shielded. The end result, they can feed on each other all they want to until they decide that they don't want to do this anymore. When they decide they don't want to do this, when they don't want to be a vampire in that sense anymore, they still will be genetically, but you know, they don't want to be one as far as their actions. The shields and siphons will break. And then they learn new ways to get energy. And they're pretty sick for a while, and sometimes they don't make it. You know, but, you know, they're not allowed to continue victimizing other people. Now, there are a lot of people out there who do the ambient feed stuff and sometimes the sexual feed and whatnot, but they don't know that they're doing it. You know, and if you're around those people, then you can say, you ever see this or this or this? You know, yeah, I've experienced that. Well, you know, you're one of those people.
So any of the vampires that are around today, they have to be descendants
Yes.
of the original ones.
Right.
I mean, in other words, there aren't any others.
Yeah, guys in Serafina, yeah.
Descendants, yeah.
But there are millions of them now because they've continued to have sex with other people too. Yeah.
No, it's ambient feed type of people. Keeping it on a personal level. My low self-esteem always had me define myself through other people to define me. As a result, I have been draining people's energies, either sexually or just interactionally. You know, draining them so that I can define myself.
Uh-huh.
Are you saying it's genetically that I'm possibly a genetic vampire, or just psychologically needy type of person who needs other people's energy?
You probably have the gene, Jerry.
I was thinking it came from low self-esteem. I didn't think it came
Well, you know-
from genetics, you know?
Well, low self-esteem can trigger the genetic process to cause that energy to you to be able to take that energy.
Because in honesty, I have
Humans
noticed
couldn't
that
do it.
I sometimes drain people's energy. That I'm, like I said, just in the process of,
And you see, you
defining
can
myself.
learn to do it better in a different way.
I don't want to do it. It's not
Okay.
something I want to do. It's just something that
Well,
I
no,
found I
I'm
have
saying-
been doing.
What I'm saying is that you can learn to get your energy in a better way.
Oh yeah, I have.
Okay.
I've tapped into a power greater than myself.
There you
I'm a sorcerer now. I tap into the source
There you go.
to get my own energy. I don't have to
There you
tap into other people.
Right, yeah, see,
I,
exactly.
I've come up more positive self-definition that I
Yeah,
don't rely on
and
other people's
that's
definition.
where these people who do it subconsciously,
So
we
what you're
can
talking
never
is,
get them to make that shift.
The only
So-
people that drain me, and I think of one person in particular, but she hasn't been in my life for many years, I couldn't handle it anymore. People who are very negative.
oh,
They're always complaining, nothing works out for them, nothing any good. And you're sitting there and you're just, oh, but what about this? And have you tried that? And they're fine when the conversation is over
Yeah.
with. And I'm
And-
just totally
And you get
drained.
irritated by their negativity and all this sort of
Yeah.
stuff, and so all this energy's dumping out.
No.
And there's a real simple way, if you wind up in a conversation with someone you think maybe they're a vampire and you want to find out, real simple. Cross your legs, or you can be standing up, to cross your legs and stuff, and put your fingers, thumb and middle finger together, and cross your arms. My second wife, her ex-husband was a psychic vampire, and we were going to a banquet where my stepdaughter was the drum major for the band and all this sort of stuff, and she was going to be honored for some stuff before she went on to college. And so we're at this banquet, and Jim is with another lady also, and he comes in and they sit down right across from us, and he immediately targets Billy with this conversation and stuff. And I had told her, she'd asked me, said, this is what's going to happen. So I told her, said, okay, this is what you do. So she just crossed her legs. I can't cross my legs the way she did. I don't work that way. But, I'd spring something if I did. So anyway, so she had her legs crossed, and she put her fingers and thumb together and crossed, and she said, yeah, sure. And it took about 2 to 3 seconds, and all of a sudden Jim turned around to the person next to him who was involved in another conversation, interrupted them, and started a conversation with them. And Billy was looking over going, wow.
Nadine was talking about negative people draining your energy. I used to be negative. I'm wondering if that was just one of those tools that I had picked up to feed other people's energy, draw their energy, is because I find positive-minded people and
A lot
express
of
my
people learn
negativity.
how to do it.
And
little
it's just a
kids
tool that I,
Yeah,
it makes
Yeah.
sense.
yeah.
Now, you know how I am, Cliff. I'm going to tell you what I honestly think. I honestly think, it may not be a vampire gene as much as a human dynamic that I have developed. That it has nothing to do with my
Well-
genetic makeup as much as my psychological makeup.
The
But
nice
vampirism,
thing
you
about
could use
doing
that as a
the
term.
shamanic and the sorcery stuff and all that sort of stuff, and people come along and try to poo-poo it over the years, like the Christians and
Yeah,
all that sort of
like
stuff.
Jerry.
Yeah, like Jerry, yeah. Hi. And, it's like, and they say to themselves, well, I just believe this. And it's like, well, that's okay. You can believe whatever you want to because your belief has nothing to do with the truth. And we go on. So, now, as far as vampires and stuff goes, today I have this gene. I can do this healing process, and it works very well. And I also have a sense of ethics that a lot of other people, some do and some don't. And I don't believe in doing things that take something from someone else without their permission. And a couple of years ago, some folks sent me a certificate telling me that I had been awarded membership in their family, as if I really And they gave me the name of Count Joseph Sheffens, Descopci of Scornacesti. And it's like, I can't even memorize that without, I have to look at it to read it. And it's like, and this guy signs his name as Count Borislav Descopci of the Scornacesti Kingdom of Vampires. Now, Scornacesti is in Romania. I have an apprentice who lives in the area. It's like he could go visit the family home if he wanted to, but he would find it would be a less than vibrant place at this point because, you know, honestly, this offended me. And I don't like vampires who do this to people against their will and stuff. So what I did is, first of all, I went and showed up there in the spirit world, and they could see me. You know, and so they saw this fat naked guy. You know, and it was like, they were like, "Who are you?" And I told them, and I said, "You know, well, so I just wanted to come and thank you for the honor that you have given me." They said, "Oh, you're welcome here anytime. You're welcome to come here physically. We'll make a place for you to live here if you would like to." I said, "Well, you know, I really like it where I live in Oklahoma, so I'm going to stay there. You know, but, you know, I will come and visit you. Oh, anytime, you're welcome here." So, you know, I go make my body. Well, what I do is as soon as I had the opportunity, like a couple of days later and stuff, I waited until I knew it was like the middle of the night for them and they were asleep. Because see, there's no such thing as vampires who run around and get burned to a crisp by the sun, unless they just spend too much time in the sun like anybody else. You know, they get sunburned and stuff. But, you know, it doesn't turn you into dust and all that sort of stuff, and you can wear silver or touch silver and all this sort of thing, and it doesn't turn you to dust, you know. All vampires are daywalkers. You know, okay, so, yeah, I went through their place and collected a whole bunch of energy and masked my own energy, and then I went and attacked several other vampire families, and then went back there and left that blob of energy and went home to my body. And all these vampire families from all over, you know, Romania and Yugoslavia and Hungary just tore them a new one. You know, so they're not doing so good today. So, you know, you're going to have fun with this, and you can do it all sorts of ways, you know, and they would consider what I did to be black magic, but I think it's very good.
I have to leave now.
Okay. So, but the interesting thing, just to finish right quick, is there's a 3-year process that anyone who either doesn't do this on stuff all the time or is a human can go through to become a vampire.
Sunday.
Isn't that exciting? And there are idiots running around out there teaching people and getting people to go through the process. And you have a whole bunch of stuff in the movies and on TV series about vampires and all that sort of stuff. And it's all a recruiting tool. There are people who want to be that way. Now, we're doing a deal that my organization is about to start a order called the Order of the Vampires of the Light. And what we're doing is we're offering people who don't really want to live this way and don't really want to be on a dark path and stuff to be able to embrace the light. And so hopefully we're going to be able to get that going probably in the next 2 or 3 weeks. But then we will start getting them to come out, and we'll start teaching them better ways to get energy and all this sort of stuff, and to use the abilities that they have that other people don't for the benefit of everyone. And so that's where we're at with it. That's it. Any questions? You want to go through the 3-year process?
No. I'll continue my process of sourcing
That's
a
good.
better sense of self that I don't have to
It's a
go
whole lot
on.
better to pass on that one because it has a lot of baggage with it. The problem with doing the vampire thing is that when you take energy from someone else, you often take a lot of their emotional baggage too. And it really sucks. No pun intended.
Now, that myth about being a version of sunlight and all that stuff from vampires probably stems from the fact that they were energy suckers, basically. And there's so much energy in the sun that they did suck more energy than they could handle and burn up. You know, I can
Yeah,
see where
but
that
also
myth would
because they
establish.
had to run around at night because people were hunting them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but I'm saying when all that propaganda against them started,
Yeah.
it was probably molded into today's myth
Yeah.
of that they can't handle the sun.
Yeah, we want to see what bitterness can do.
I don't need to. I've been there.
Yeah. Prince Dagon, you know, the priest that came up with this, wrote a book that had several translations over the years and stuff, and finally solidified into one form, known as the Cursed Book of Dagon. And he went from being a man who really, really wanted to help people and improve things to someone who was about as dark and evil as you could be, because he'd seen so many of his children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren murdered in front of his eyes, you know, by people who didn't understand. And he also developed a system whereby people can, you hear this thing about vampires living forever? Well, it's not in the same body. They go from one body to another. What they do is they go into the womb of a woman, and it's an extreme, difficult ritual process, but then you go into the womb of a woman who's about to bear a child, and you force that child's spirit out, and you take its place, and you're born in its place. And someone who is known as the 14th, and I won't bother saying his title, has chosen not to do this anymore. And he is considered one of the most beloved spiritual leaders on the planet. And he's chosen not to do this way. And the Cherokee tribe, the Iroquois tribes and stuff, we know this as being a raven mocker. And it's a horrible, horrible, evil thing. But he was supposedly doing it for a good purpose. Excuse me. Now he's learned that it wasn't so good, and so he's giving it up. So these people, even the ones who are as far off of it, off into it as they can get, can still find their way to life. Question, Mary? I think you already do a lot of this.
Just a desire to, yeah, just a desire to learn more.
Right?
No more comment?
We are done then, and we're going to Tibetan Buddhism next week.
I don't have money on Tuesdays, so I can't contribute. Okay.
Put it in on Sunday.
I might have money on Sunday.
Or next month.
Yeah, or next
Well,
month.
you know, whenever. Or you can simply do something good for someone else.